Hello everybody, John here from the Sports Department going over tonight's 5-game LPL LCK slate. Um, this is a very interesting one. A lot of really close, good matchups, but also, I don't know what DraftKings did with their pricing, but their pricing algorithm is really thrown off on the slate. It's created some very weird situations where ownership is extremely tough for me to predict. Um, because a lot of times when I look at the ownerships, I want to look at who's going to be able to fit in, who people are going to want to put in their lineups price-wise to fit, whoever the big favorite or whatever that they want to fit is. But the pricing on this slate is very, very bizarre. You have things like GenG, who's the biggest favorite on the slate, I believe. One of the cheapest teams on the slate. You can see it's sorted by price. The fourth cheapest jungler on the slate. I guess Rascal's reasonably expensive. BDD's down fourth cheapest mid. Ruler's the fifth cheapest AD carry. And other things like Aiming, who's on a team who's a favorite, is the fourth cheapest AD carry. Just some very weird, like PP God, 4,200. BLG at minus 140 to win. Just some very, very bizarre pricing, and I think part of it is definitely due to their algorithm is now taking into account fantasy scoring. For sure, it's not just about money lines like it once was. Because like LWX is the fifth cheapest AD carry, and I noticed he's not had the best season fantasy-wise, but Doinby is the most expensive mid, despite LWX being the fifth most expensive AD carry. Tian's third. Like, that's what I'm talking about. It's just so back and forth. Nuguri's fourth. Tian is third. Doinby is the highest. LWX is fifth. And then Crisp is the highest. So, like, and then Kellen is the second highest for supports. It's just very, very bizarre pricing. You see the same thing here. Gory is the third cheapest mid, but Diakdem is the third most expensive AD carry, and Kellen is the second most expensive support. Just very, very bizarre pricing. And Peanut is the most expensive jungler. Very, very confusing pricing that makes it really hard. I'm very interested to see what we can get. So we're going to end up looking through some different lineup types here, because with the weird pricing, you can probably fit all different kinds of things. The first matchup of the day, Team WE. They're minus 155, 3-1 on the season. Going up against Rare Atom, plus 120. They are 4-1 on the season. Against winning teams, WE is 0-1, Rare Atom is 2-1. Worth noting because statistically, WE does get the better of it. 1829 to 1770, plus 137 to plus 53. Advantages in first blood, first turret. Rare Atom has a very slight dragon advantage, 4%. But they have had a tougher strength of schedule and done better against the good teams that they've faced as opposed to WE. It is early in the season for WE, but Rare Atom is the first in a line of many very live underdogs, in my opinion. You could definitely be on Rare Atom here tonight. I think it's a GPP play, but WE I don't think I'm going to go to in cash probably. I'm a little hesitant about them not having faced a lot of strong competition so far. Also, Rare Atom being a lower KPW DPL team, I might just stay away from them. Stay away from this matchup when it comes to cash. GPP wise, I think both the teams have a really high ceiling, and being involved with either one of them is a pretty good idea. The second match of the day, OMG at plus 110. They're 3-1 on the season, up against BLG, minus 140, who is 1-3 on the season. Against winning teams, OMG is 0-1, BLG is 1-2. Statistically, OMG is going to take the lead, 1774 to 1726, plus 14 to minus 55. It's a 70-30 to 36-63, so kind of switched around. First blood going to OMG, first turret to BLG. Dragon percentages, it's 4% to OMG, and this is kind of similar to the last matchup in that BLG has faced a much stronger strength of competition, but OMG has done better overall so far this season. I do think BLG is a deserved favorite here, and I think that even though OMG currently has a very low DPL, I expect that to go way up when they lose some more games. So I'm on BLG here, and I actually think BLG is cash playable. I'm more confident in BLG than I am in WE, who's the bigger money line favorite according to Bovada. Um, I think this is a good spot to take advantage of OMG's early season easy schedule and the performances that they've had so far. I would keep in mind though, when I do versus winning for OMG, one of the teams that's not being counted as a winning team is RNG, which could be worth, you know, really they're kind of 1-1 against winning teams because we all know at the end of the season RNG is probably going to be a winning team. So it's not as weak of a strength of schedule as it looks, but BLG I do think should be the favorite in this matchup, and I think they're probably cash playable for me. I'll have a look. They're definitely on the scarier side of cash playable, so if I can avoid them in cash, pretty reasonable chance that I will. Third matchup of the day, one of the biggest bangers. FPX minus 165. They're 4-1 on the season so far. Up against RNG plus 125. They are 1-2 on the season. Against winning teams, FPX is 1-1. RNG is 0-2. So no wins against winning teams for RNG, but most importantly, just absolutely schlomped in the stats. 1930 to 1806 plus 219 to minus 10. This is the weird part, is RNG's first blood first turret extremely good. FPX is extremely bad, 2541 to 8585. Dragon percentage, huge advantage again for FPX. Questionable part here for me, do I want to risk it on FPX when RNG is clearly getting some things done in the early game in a metagame where we talked about snowballing for any team extremely possible? I think I still trust FPX enough that it's not too big of a problem. The important thing to note in this one is the KPW DPLs for these two teams are massive. This is almost certainly your highest scoring game unless this goes to 3, where each team has a dominant victory like I talk about sometimes. If that doesn't happen, it feels like this is the matchup you want 100%, exposure to. You could fade off of it to try to get some ownership, like on your lineup, but this feels like a matchup that you really want to be involved in. I think I'm going to end up with a lot of FPX. I have FPX as cash playable tonight too, even though they're a little scary. But I think I'll probably end up with FPX in my cash lineups and probably a lot of my GPP lineups. I do think they're a pretty reasonable favorite, and the stats are just, the KPW DPL numbers are just so big. The projections are catching up to this season now, I think. We're starting to see that, and Gala and Doinby being two of the top 3 projections kind of shows you this is a matchup that wants to be targeted. Going over to the LCK, the Afrika Freaks at plus 220. They're 4-1 on the season, up against GenG, who's minus 300, 5-0 on the season. This is an interesting part, though, is that versus winning teams, Afrika is 0-1 and GenG is 1-0. So these teams, neither one of them has played very many of the other winning teams in the league. That said, there's only 4 winning teams in the LCK right now, and they are 2 of them, and they haven't played each other. So there wasn't really an option for them to play a lot of winning teams. Gold per minute wise, GenG's the better team, 1857 to 1821. They have an advantage in GDM, 175 to 122. They are the better first blood team, but the worse first turret team, so slight pump for Afrika there. In Dragon percentage, Afrika is ahead by 2%. Herald percentage, they're ahead by 24%. And at 15 minutes, Afrika is better at gold at 15. Point being, this is a very mixed matchup, I think. There's some things that Afrika does better. Their early games have been better so far this season. GenG's look like maybe the best team in the LCK, so this is a pretty even matchup. It's worth noting, though, that the KPWs for both these teams are pretty low. GenG's DPL is extremely low. Afrika has a decent DPL, but with some of the matchups on this slate, I just can't imagine this being the one that I want to go to. In a GPP, I could see going to this matchup to try to get the ownerships, but I'm just not a huge fan of this matchup overall. I think if you wanted to do it for ownership's sake in the GPPs, I wouldn't mind it, but in general, this feels like a GPP fadeable matchup to me. There's a lot of stuff going on with RNG, FPX, BLG, OMG, even WE Rare Atom. That this one just feels like somewhere you might not need to go. GenG in general just hasn't been a team that you really wanted to be involved with when it came to ceiling performances. and it feels like we might be going there again on this slate. I may just find myself taking a step back as far as GPPs from that matchup. And the last matchup of the day, Nongshim Red Force minus 275, 4-1 on the season. They are 0-1 against winning teams. Freda Brion plus 200, 2-3 on the season, 1-1 against winning teams. Worth noting that Nongshim is a bit of a pretender at 4-1 here. Statistically, when you're looking at their numbers, they're really not 4-1 material compared to, say, Afrika. Afrika is another 4-1 team. They're at 18-21 and plus 122. Nongshim's at 17-74 and plus 33. This 35-28 is pretty low. Low 50s for both Dragon and Herald, and they're negative 1,000 gold at 15 minutes. It's not really the stats of a 4-1 team. Freda Brion, slightly worse than them in GPM and GDM. Better in First Blood and First Turret, better in Dragons. Slightly worse in Heralds, but better at 15 minutes. Freda Brion feels like the underdog on the slate that's maybe most likely to win. There's some really good underdogs on this slate, but Freda Brion feels to me like they're very, very live here. The problem is, this is the matchup I'm definitely taking a step back from when it comes to GPPs and stuff. The highest number in anybody's KPW or DPL is 17. That's on the Nongshim side, with Freda Brion at 16.3 kill per win. With the pricing on this slate, though, I just don't think you're going to need to go to a team like Freda Brion, because I think you're going to be able to get some pretty nice captains of the teams that you would really want to play, especially if you're messing around with like RNG or FPX or BLG. Some of the players on those teams are so cheap that I don't think you're going to have to mess around with this matchup if you don't want to. It's not a lot of times I would love seeing Freda Brion in this position because I could play them with some of my big favorites that I wanted to play, but this slate doesn't really have huge favorites. Even the ones that are like the biggest favorites on the slate, GenG, we saw them very, very cheap in a number of positions. There's really no team that seems like the pricing is kind of prohibitive to the point where you need an underdog to go with them. And if I don't really need an underdog, then Nongshim and Freda Brion is not really the matchup I want to target. For ownership, I think ownership is extremely hard to predict on this slate. I put GenG pretty high just because there's still a lot of people using moneyline projections, and moneyline projections probably have GenG is like one of the biggest points to play on the slate. The other spots are very, very hard to predict. I have FPX as the highest because I think people will recognize that FPX and RNG is an extremely bloody matchup, and they'll probably want to get in on that matchup. It's possible that RNG takes away enough ownership from FPX that FPX is lower than this. I do have a really hard time seeing GenG being the highest owned team on the slate, though. WE should get some ownership, I think, and BLG and OMG. I think BLG and OMG's combined ownership, there's a chance is higher than Rare Atom and WE, but they'll take more ownership away from each other. So I have them down a little bit lower, but I think this matchup might be pretty highly owned, even if neither team is that big of a number. I could honestly see WE and RNG being below both of these as well, but it's really hard for me to tell on this slate because of the way that the pricing plays out. For cash, I think the teams that I trust are BLG, FPX, and GenG. I don't even think I trust Nongshim Red Force. I really think they're kind of pretending at the moment. They're having a good season, but I think they're still kind of an overperformer, and I think the minus 275 is a little bigger than it actually is for this team. So I think I'd be happier going with BLG, FPX, or GenG. BLG, FPX, BLG, GenG, and then FPX, GenG. If I was going to put another team in here, you could play WE, but I think these are the teams I really would prefer to look at. Let me just look at all the favorites first before I look at cash lineups. So at top lane, it's BLG and then WE with FPX in third. In the jungle, FPX, WE, BLG, so the three LPL teams again. In the mid lane, BDD pops up there, but the other three are the LPL teams. AD carry, it's WE and FPX. BLG drops down a spot, Diokdam above him. And its support, it's FPX, WE, and then Nongshim and BLG. So WE consistently like the second highest, roughly. Makes me want to consider them a little bit more, or makes me want to play them a little bit more in the GPPs, because it feels like people might not be on them as much. And these are the kind of things I'm talking about, by the way. Like Elk is 7,800, which seems like a fair price for Elk. But in the mid lane, Mole is 6,800. So if you really want to play WE, Mole is going to help you get there, like in a big way. It's just so weird. The pricing on this slate is just so weird. It's really throwing me off. So let's take a look at a couple cash lineups real quick, and then I want to do a little bit of experimenting with some other teams too. Let's start BLG FPX. With aiming being extremely cheap, I'm guessing you can get 80 carry captain, no problem. Yep. LWX captain, Tian, Crisp, and then you can play Doinby or Nuguri if you want. If you're going to go LWX captain, I think I would switch to Doinby, even though the projection's not great. It's a 599.8. That lineup, I mean, that's probably what I'm going to play, though. Let's look at BLG GenG. That lineup just is really, really strong as far as I'm concerned, so I'm probably just going to end up there. BLG, a 4 BLG with Zika captain, 592.3. It's another good lineup. If you're looking for some additional safety instead of playing FPX, you want to get GenG in there. I mean, it's a lot safer. Or not a lot safer, but a reasonable amount safer. GenG FPX. That's LWX captain as well. This one's 603.4. So this one projects slightly better. 4.4 points. 4.6 points. And GenG is just safer than BLG. So I guess there's really no reason to go to BLG. I really thought I would want to be on the BLG FPX, but if this is going to project better, I'm not sure why it projects better, but I trust the projections. And if this is going to project better, yeah, and it's part of its team slot related, which I hate to see, but I guess Afrika's playing pretty well. It's maybe not quite as safe as I'm giving it, but GenG should be a pretty reasonable favorite. I mean, it's hard to argue against this one, man. I'll be honest with you. It's hard to argue with FPX GenG at 603.4. If you wanted, you could play FPX BLG as well. I think the 599.8 is pretty good. I think that lineup's pretty safe. But with FPX GenG projecting this well, I feel like the thing that bothers me is when I came into this slate and I looked at this thing, I said, my opponents, the guys that I normally play, who use moneyline projections, are going to be on GenG on this slate. And I kind of don't want to be on GenG with them, but I guess if you can get a lineup like this, you might as well. Yeah, those all seem reasonable. Let me see what happens if you mix, like, say, WE with FPX. This is not necessarily for cash, but just for, I just want to see how it fits. Yeah, that fits no problem. This is like, you can get anybody you want on this slate, it seems like. That one at least uses your salary. Yeah, I mean, you're just like 80k captains everywhere. And mid captains everywhere. You can just play whatever you want on this slate, basically. This is basically just choose your combination, and you're going to be able to get whatever you feel like, it looks like. Trying to think, is there like any combination? No, because GenG's cheap. I'm just not sure there's like any combination where you can't just play whatever you want. Yeah, you can play those two. Well, this is basically like salary-less DFS. You can play any combination of teams you want here, pretty much however you want to play them. So, play who you feel like, boys. Who I feel like playing tonight, for cash, I think I'm going to go with the FPX GenG. There's some chance I pivot over to the BLG FPX, but I'm probably going to go with FPX GenG. For GPPs, I think I'm just going to fade Korea. I might play an Afrika lineup or two, but mostly I think I'm going to be on RNG, FPX, probably every lineup, BLG, OMG in most of my lineups, and then a hint of WE and Rare Atom feels like probably what I'm going to end up with for GPPs today. Maybe just a hint of that Rare Atom WE game, and just a hint of maybe GenG and Afrika just in case. But crazy slate, dude. This is crazy that you can just play whatever you want. I'm interested to see how this plays out and if people like it or not. It's definitely a departure from some other things that we've seen price-wise. So that's all for me, gents. Good luck on the slate tonight. Let me know how you like this pricing setup from DK. I'm interested in what the feedback is on is something like this. Is this what you'd prefer? Just being able to play whoever on a 5-gamer like this? I mean, it's a 5-gamer with a lot of close matchups, so I kind of like it for this slate because it's not like there's an obvious place to go. I could see this pricing being a problem if it was like, G2 Astralis was on the slate or whatever, and they just wanted to make it so you could play whatever. I mean, G2's ownership is just going to be way too high. But on a slate like this, feels like the ownership should be pretty split. So it kind of makes sense. Yeah, I'm still a little puzzled by it, but hit me up. Let me know what you think, and let's get some money tonight, guys. I'll talk to you later.